Chapter 2 Civilizations.
We are always rushing towards some place or something. Each of us wants to live a happy life, meet our true love, create a family. But how many of us ever achieve our wish? What does our satisfaction or dissatisfaction with life depend on? Our success or failure? Wherein lies the meaning of life for each person and for all mankind as a whole? What awaits us in the future? These questions have persisted for a long time, but no one has answered them distinctly. Nevertheless, one would like to know the kind of country we and our children will be living in 5 or in 10 years. But we do not know, and are probably not all that capable of imagining our future, because we are always rushing towards some place. But where? It's incredible, but it's a fact. I received a precise notion of our country's future. For the first time, not from scholarly analysts or politicians, but from the taiga hermit Anastasia. She did not simply show me a picture of a beautiful future, but also proved through arguments the possibility of its fulfillment as soon as in our generation. She basically presented her plan for the country's development. As I walked through the taiga from the glade where Anastasia lives toward the river, for some reason I was visited by a firm confidence that her plan would change a great deal in the world. If one bears in mind that everything she has modeled in her thoughts has always later come to pass in real life, then we basically already live in a country whose future can be only beautiful. As I walked, I pondered the taiga hermit's words about the country's future, where even our generation might be able to live, a country without regional conflicts, crime, poverty, or illness. And although I did not understand all her thoughts, this time I did not feel like doubting anything she had said. On the contrary, I felt like proving to everyone she was right. I firmly decided to do everything I could to implement her plan. Outwardly, it seemed quite simple. Each family needs to be given a hectare of land for lifetime use and build its own homestead on it, its own piece of the homeland. But the details of this plan had taken a firm grip on my thoughts. They were extremely simple and at the same time incredible. Astounding! A taiga hermit rather than soil experts proved that with the correct arrangement of plantings within a plot, in just a few years the land would not only need no fertilization, but that not even very fertile soil would improve. As her main example, Anastasia cited the taiga. The taiga has existed for millennia, everything grows in it, and no one fertilizes the taiga earth. Anastasia says that everything that grows is the incarnate thought of God, and he set everything up so that man does not need to burden himself with the problems of obtaining food. He merely has to try to understand the Creator's thought and create what is beautiful along with him. I can even cite a clear personal example. On the island of Cyprus, where I've had occasion to travel, the soil is rocky, but it wasn't always like that. Many centuries ago, beautiful cedar trees and fruit trees grew on the island. The purest fresh water flowed in many rivers, and the island resembled an earthly paradise. Roman legions seized the island and began chopping down cedars to build their ships. They wiped out the cedar groves on the island. Now, a large part of the island is covered with very stunted scrub and grass that burns up by spring. The summer rains have become rare, and there is not enough fresh water. Cypriots have to bring fertile soil to the island over the sea in barges. Man has not made creation better, but through his barbarous interferences has made it worse. Detailing her plan, Anastasia said that a family tree must be planted without fail. Furthermore, someone who has died should be buried not in a cemetery, but in the beautiful plot of the native land he has cultivated himself. No tombstones should be placed on a grave. The person's memory should be living, not dead. The memory for relatives will be the person's living creations, and then his soul can again be embodied in matter, in his paradisical earthly garden. Those buried in a cemetery could not end up in heaven. Their souls cannot be embodied in matter as long as relatives and friends' thoughts of their death exist. A tombstone is a monument to death. The burial ritual was thought up by the forces of darkness, and its goal is to confine the human soul at least for a while. Our Father did not create suffering or even sorrow for his beloved children. All divine creations are eternal and self-sufficient and reproduce themselves. Everything alive on earth, from the outwardly simple blade of grass to the human being, represents the harmonious single and eternal whole. I think she's right. Look what comes of this. Now, scholars claim that human thought is material, but if this is so, then it follows that the relatives of the deceased, by thinking of him as dead, thereby maintain him in his deadened state and torment his soul. Anastasia says that the human being, or rather the human soul, can live eternally. It can be constantly embodied in a new body, but only under certain conditions. The homestead set up according to Anastasia's plan would create those conditions. I simply chose to believe this, and will leave it to erudite scholars probably more qualified than I to prove or refute Anastasia's assertions about life and death. I told Anastasia, "Oh, you will have many opponents." She just laughed in response.
Now everything is going to come about so simply now, Vladimir. Human thought is capable of materializing and altering objects, of predetermining events, of building the future. And so it will be that the opponents who are going to try to prove the perishability of the human substance will destroy themselves, for they will produce their own demise with their own thoughts. Those who are able to understand their destiny and the essence of infinity will begin to live happily, re-embodied eternally, for with their thoughts they themselves will create their own happy infinity.
I also liked her plan very much when I began calculating its economic logic, and was convinced that everyone, with the help of the homestead he founded according to Anastasia's plan, could provide a comfortable existence for his children and grandchildren. It is not merely a matter of providing children with high-quality nourishment and housing. Anastasia said that the fence must be made out of living trees, and woods should occupy 1/4 of the hectare. 2,500 square meters of wood is approximately 300 trees. In 80 or 100 years, they could be chopped down. These trees would yield about 400 cubic meters of edged board. At today's price of at least $100 per cubic meter, the total yield of well-dried finished lumber would fetch $40,000. Of course, the entire woods should not be felled. One could take the necessary part of the mature trees and immediately replace them by planting new ones. The total value of a homestead set up according to Anastasia's plan could be $1 million or more, and any family of even average means could build it. For starters, the house can be more than modest. The main wealth would comprise the correctly and handsomely arranged plot of land. Wealthy people now already pay large sums of money to landscape design firms. There are about 40 such businesses in Moscow, and they are not lacking work. The proper and handsome arrangement of the entire 100 square meters attached to a house cost, by their estimates, $1,500 and up. Planting a single coniferous tree 6 meters high costs $500, and those who want to live in a place handsomely arranged pay those large sums. They pay because it did not occur to their parents to set up a homestead for their children. After all, this does not require being rich. All it requires is setting one's priorities correctly. How can we raise our children if we ourselves do not understand such simple things? Anastasia is right when she says that one has to begin with raising oneself. I developed a very strong desire to have my own homestead, to take a hectare of land, to build a house, and most importantly, to plant all kinds of things around it. I wanted to set up my own piece of homeland in the way Anastasia described, and so that the handsome plots of others surrounded it as well. Anastasia and our son could settle there or visit, and then the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Perhaps my great-grandchildren would want to work in the city. But then they could come to the homestead to relax. And once a year, on the 23rd of July, on Whole Earth Day, all relatives would gather in their own home. Of course, I would no longer be around by then, but the homestead I had planted would remain, as would the trees and garden growing on it. I would dig a small pond and stock it with fry, so there would be fish. I would plant the trees according to a special arrangement, as Anastasia said. My descendants would like some of it and want to redo some of it, but in both cases they would remember me. I would be buried on my own homestead, and ask that my grave not be marked in any way. I don't want anyone playing the hypocrite over it with a sorrowful look. I don't want there to be any sorrow at all. I don't want there to be a grave with a tombstone. I just want fresh grass and bushes to grow from my body and soar over the earth, and maybe even some kind of healthy berries for my descendants. What is the point of tombstones? None. Nothing but sorrow. I want people to remember me with joy, not sorrow, when they come to the homestead I create. How I will create it all for them, how I will plant. My thoughts joyously foreshadowed something grand. I have to start soon. I have to act somehow, get to town faster. But I still have 10 kilometers or so to go through this forest alone. I wish it would end quickly, this forest. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, information surfaced in my mind about Russia's forest. I didn't remember all the figures, so I'll cite the data I once read in a statistical report.
Forest is Russia's principal type of vegetation. It occupies 45% of its territory. Russia possesses the greatest forest reserves in the world. As of 1993, the area of forest comprised 886.5 million hectares, and the total timber reserve 80.7 billion, which is 21.7 and 25.9% of the world's reserves, respectively. The fact that the second figure is greater than the first speaks to the fact that Russia possesses more mature and more productive forest than the rest of the planet as a whole. Forests play a tremendous role in the atmosphere's balance of gases and the regulation of the Earth's planetary climate. The total balance for Russia's forests, calculated by B.N. Moiseyev, came to 1,789,064,800 metric tons of carbon dioxide and 1,299,019,900 metric tons of oxygen. Annually, 600 million metric tons of carbon dioxide is deposited in Russia's forest. These gigantic volumes of gas migration substantially stabilize the planet's gas makeup and climate. There you have it. Some people say that Russia has a special mission, but that mission is not up ahead. It's already being carried out by the forests. My goodness, people all over the planet, some to a lesser degree, some to a greater, it doesn't matter. What does matter is everyone on Earth breathes Russia's air, taking in the oxygen this forest produces, and right now I'm just walking through it. I wonder whether it is just oxygen this forest supplies to all people on Earth, or perhaps something else important.
Now the taiga I was walking through alone did not give rise to alarm in me as before. I felt the way you do walking through a safe park. Of course, there are no park paths in the taiga, and the way is sometimes blocked by a boulder or thick bushes, but they didn't annoy me this time. I picked berries I encountered along the way as I passed. Raspberries, currants. For the first time, I was curious to examine how different even trees of the same type are in their outward appearance, how variously the vegetation is distributed, so there is not a single identical scene. For the first time, I looked closely at the taiga, and it seemed nobler. This feeling probably arose as well from the awareness that in this taiga, my little son and Anastasia, the woman who changed my entire life when I met her, were born and lived. In this boundless taiga, there is Anastasia's small glade, which she does not like to leave for long and would not exchange for any apartment, even the most elegant. This glade is seemingly the usual blank spot, no building, no cabin, none of the accommodations necessary for daily life, whereas she immediately rejoices as soon as she approaches it. For some reason, on my third visit to Anastasia's glade, I too felt the way you do when you come home after a difficult trip.
Strange things are happening in our world in general. For millennia, human society apparently fought for the happiness and well-being of each person. But if you look closely, this very person living at the center of society, at the center of the modern civilized city, has become increasingly defenseless. Either he lands in a car wreck or he's robbed. All kinds of pains are constantly besieging him. He can no longer live without pharmacies, or he commits suicide over some dissatisfaction. The number of suicides, specifically in civilized countries with a high standard of living, is mounting. Mothers from various regions appear on television and say they have nothing to feed their children and their families are starving. Anastasia lives with her small child in the taiga, as if in a different civilization. She asks nothing from our society and needs no police or interior troops for her protection. One gets the impression that nothing bad could ever happen to her or her child in this glade. Of course, we have different civilizations, and she proposes taking the best of these two different worlds. Then the way of life will change for many people on Earth, and a happy new human community will be born. It will be an interesting community, new and unusual. For instance,
Chapter: Taste the Universe.
For a long time I could not agree with the fact that Anastasia quite calmly left her still nursing infant alone. Either she would simply lay him on the grass under some bush, or else next to some resting she-bear or she-wolf. I was already convinced that no beast would touch him. On the contrary, they would defend him to their last breath. Only from whom? If the beast around him were like nannies, then who was there to defend against? Nevertheless, it's unsettling when an infant is left alone, and I tried to convince Anastasia not to do that. If beasts don't touch the child, that doesn't mean some other misfortune won't befall him.
I cannot imagine what kind of misfortune you're thinking about, Vladimir.
The many things that can happen to helpless children. For instance, he could climb a hillock and then roll off and twist his little leg or arm.
The height a child can climb himself will not bring him harm.
Well, and if he eats something harmful? He's foolish. He puts everything in his mouth. He could easily poison himself. And then who would pump his stomach? There aren't any doctors nearby, and you don't even have an enema to cleanse the child's bowels if something happened. Anastasia only laughed.
Why an enema, Vladimir? There are other much more effective ways than enemas to cleanse the bowels.
How's that?
Do you want to try? It wouldn't hurt you. I'll bring you a few herbs right away.
Wait, no need, I understand. You want to give me something to upset my stomach.
You've had an upset stomach for a long time. The herb will drive everything nasty from your stomach.
I see. If anything happens, you'll give the child herbs and he'll have diarrhea. But why let matters go that far with the child?
They won't. Our son is not going to eat anything nasty. Children, especially nursing infants used to mother's milk, are never going to eat anything else in large quantities. Our son can only take a taste of one little berry or herb. If it's harmful, it will taste bitter, nasty for him, and he'll spit it out himself. If he eats a little and it starts to harm the stomach, he'll throw up. On the other hand, he will remember it and won't eat it again. But he will know the whole earth not from someone's stories but by taste. Let our son taste the universe.
In general, she's probably right. Nothing bad has ever once happened to the child. I also noticed one interesting circumstance. The beasts that surround Anastasia's glade themselves train or teach their offspring how to interact with human beings. I used to think that it was Anastasia herself doing that, but later I became convinced that she does not spend her time on that. Once we were sitting at the edge of the glade in the sun. Anastasia had just nursed our son, and he lay blissfully in her arms. First he dozed or slept a tiny bit. Then he began touching Anastasia's hair with his little hand and smiling. Anastasia looked and smiled at our son too, and gently whispered to him. I saw the she-wolf come out into the glade with its brood, 4 very little cubs. The she-wolf was walking towards us, but at about 10 meters it laid down in the grass. The cubs tottered after her, immediately got settled at her belly. Anastasia saw the she-wolf and cubs lying there, stood up, carrying our son, walked up to it, squatted a couple of meters from the she-wolf, and began to examine the wolf's brood with a smile.
Oh, what handsome cubs our clever girl has borne. One is certain to be a leader, and this little girl is just like its mamma, will bring pleasure and continue the line worthily.
The she-wolf seemed to be dozing. Its eyes squinted languidly, either because it was dozing or from the caress in Anastasia's voice. The cubs left the she-wolf's belly in peace and began looking at Anastasia, and one of them, still not moving very confidently, headed in her direction. The she-wolf, who seemed to be dozing, suddenly leapt up, snatched up the cub in its teeth, and tossed him back with the others. The same thing happened with another cub, and a third, and a fourth, all trying to get close to Anastasia. The foolish cubs kept up their attempts, but the she-wolf would not let them until they stopped their forays. The two cubs started wrestling, and the others sat peacefully watching us. The child in Anastasia's arms also saw the she-wolf and cubs, and began looking at them. Then he kicked his little legs impatiently and made some summoning call. Anastasia held out her hand to the she-wolf and cubs. Two cubs tottered toward the outstretched human hand, but this time the she-wolf did not try to stop them. On the contrary, she nudged the two playing cubs toward the outstretched hand. Soon after, they were next to Anastasia. One started nipping a finger of Anastasia's outstretched hand, another rested its paws on her arm and stood, and two others crept up to her foot. My son was squirming in Anastasia's arms, obviously trying to get to the cubs. Anastasia lowered him to the grass, and he immediately forgot everything and started playing with them. After approaching the she-wolf and gently petting its nape, Anastasia returned to me. I realized that the she-wolf, which was trained never to disturb Anastasia independently, would come to her only at a specific gesture, and now that she-wolf was teaching the same to its offspring. The she-wolf had probably been taught by its mother, and its mother by its mother, and so the beast had handed down the rules for relations with human beings from generation to generation. And they are respectful relations, tactful, I must say. But who taught them the other to attack man, and how? In general, when you get to know the life of hermits of the Siberian taiga, lots of different questions arise, questions you could never have guessed possible before. Anastasia has no intention of changing her hermit's way of life. However, when I think about Anastasia as a hermit, I immediately associate the word hermit with someone isolated from society and from the information of the modern world. But what in fact happens? After each visit of mine to a glade, I published a new book. Various people discuss it, old and young, scholars and leaders of religious confessions. Rather than me bringing her information from our all-informed society, she is presenting me with information that society finds interesting.
So who is the true hermit then? Haven't we become lost in a web of abundance, or rather, an apparent abundance of information? In fact, we have become isolated or broken off from the true source of information. What we have, in fact, is that Anastasia's remote taiga glade is the information center, like a cosmodrome to other dimensions of being. So, who am I? Who are we? And who is Anastasia? Does this really matter now? The main thing lies elsewhere, in her latest statements concerning the possibility of transformation to a better life for the individual person, country, and human society as a whole by means of altering the conditions of an individual's daily life. It is incredibly simple. Each person must be given at least a hectare of land, and then she goes on to tell us what needs to be done on this land. And then, it's incredible, such simplicity. And man will always have the energy of love. There will be spouses who love each other. There will be happy children. Many diseases will vanish, and wars and cataclysms will cease. Man will get closer to God. Basically, she has proposed constructing many glades similar to hers next to the big cities. At the same time, she does not reject using our civilization's achievements. Let the negative work for the good, too, she says. I have come to believe in her project, to believe in the beautiful thing that must happen when it is implemented in our life. A lot of it seemed understandable. However, I have to check everything thoroughly one more time and think it through. Her project has to be adapted to each locale.
I was gripped by Anastasia's idea concerning land and its arrangement. I wanted to get home as fast as possible and see what scholars had to say about similar settlements. Was there anything like it in the world already? I wanted first to design the new settlement in detail, and then begin to build it jointly with those wishing to take part in its construction. Of course, neither I nor anyone else alone can take responsibility for single-handedly designing this beautiful settlement of the future. We must do it together. We will have to discuss the information together and design our settlement, taking others' mistakes into account.
Chapter Oroville Dreams.
For the first few months after my return from Anastasia's, I intensively collected and studied information on eco-settlements. Most sources spoke about foreign analogs. Altogether, I collected information on this topic for about 86 settlements in 19 countries: Belgium, Canada, Denmark, England, France, Germany, India, and others. But the information was no particular cause for rejoice. No country had a sufficiently broad movement, and there were no settlements capable of wielding significant influence on the social situation in those countries. One of the largest and best-known settlements was in India, the town of Oroville. I will speak about it in a little more detail. Oroville was founded in 1968 by Meera Richard, the wife of Integral Yoga founder Sri Aurobindo. It was proposed that on land set aside by the Indian government not far from Pondicherry, where the Sri Aurobindo Ashram, a center for integral yoga devotees, had been operating since the 1940s, a settlement would appear, and a city of 50,000 would rise up. Oroville, which means City of the Dawn or City of the Morning Dawn, was supposed to bring to life the idea of unifying people connected by a common goal of building a harmonious material world that is not in contradiction with the world of the spirit. In the charter she wrote, Meera Richard said,
"Our Oroville will be a site of material and spiritual researches for a living embodiment of an actual human unity."
The idea of creating a city where people would live in harmony with the world of nature, in harmony with spirit and love, was approved by the Indian government, Indira Gandhi personally, and UNESCO, and received financial support from the Indian government and many sponsors. Representatives from 121 countries and 23 Indian states attended the founding ceremony. A beautiful city, the dream of probably the majority of the world's spiritual people, began to be built. However, after Meera Richard's death in 1973, Aurobindo's pupil, Sat Prem, came out harshly against Oroville, calling it nothing but a commercial enterprise. The Sri Aurobindo Ashram, which controlled the majority of the enterprise's finances, laid claim to power over everything that went on in the city. But the settlers felt that their commune belonged to the whole world, and the ashram could not give it orders. An acute confrontation began between the spiritual ashram and the spiritual Aurovillians. The confrontation was not only on the spiritual level, but kept moving more and more onto the physical. In 1980, the Indian government was forced to issue a decision on removing Oroville from the control of the Sri Aurobindo Society. A permanent police station appeared in the settlement. The Oroville situation contributed to the general crisis in Sri Aurobindo's movement and teaching. Today, about 1,200 people live in Oroville, not the more than 50,000 the organizers proposed. The entire region counts 13 villages, 30,000 people, along with the local residents. The reason for the Oroville Dreams failure may lie in the following situation. If an Orovillian has permission, he has the right to build himself a house, but legally the land it stands on will belong to Oroville. The land is acquired with the Orovillian's funds but in the name of Oroville. In this way, Oroville is given complete confidence, but none of its residents has its complete confidence. Each resident is dependent. But after all, the project was the work of people who considered themselves highly spiritual. Evidently, there is another side to the spirituality coin. Oroville's present-day status has seriously upset and depressed me. No doubts have arisen concerning Anastasia's project. However, negative thoughts have entered my mind. If they can't make a normal settlement in India work, a country considered practically the leader in its spiritual understanding of human existence, if this couldn't be made to work with financial support from the Indian government, UNESCO, and sponsors from different countries, then how could Anastasia alone foresee all the snags? Even if she was not alone, even if a mass of readers sharing her views attempted to plan everything, think it through, foresee, it might not be made to work by all of them together because no one has experience. If anyone knew the cornerstone on which a happy existence can be built for the individual person and a community as a whole, then a happy community could probably be built somewhere. But it hasn't been. Not in a single country. We have only negative experience. Where are we to find positive experience?
In Russia.
End of chapter. Join us for the next segment of Who Are We? Book 5 of the Ringing Cedar series, Precursors of a New Civilization.